All right, here we are at episode 2. So now that you know what I got as far as vehicles go with the bus and the RV and how I plan on mashing them together, let's take a deep dive into the details of both vehicles and reveal what I found out. Here we go. Welcome to episode 2 from sunny Florida. I'm on vacation, but I figured I'd make a little bit of video. As stated in the video before, the next few videos are going to be about specifics about the RV and the bus. I'm maybe referring to my notes here. But these videos are going to cover vehicle specifics and my decision matrix, if you will, how my decision process went. But I'm going to progress through all these topics starting at the front of the vehicle and going back, and it's really going to be specific to the drivetrain only. So like I said, it's going to be 3 shorter videos instead of just one ridiculously long one. There are a lot of topics to cover. So in this video, I'm going to be covering vehicle weight or mass, the engine, and the differential. But before I start with that, I get questions when people find out that I'm going to be Cummins swapping this RV, and the question comes up of why don't you just convert the bus to an RV? And I have very specific reasons why I don't want to do that. One of the reasons I don't want to do a schoolie conversion, one of the factors are weight. The bus is extremely heavy, 28,000 pounds empty right now. It's pretty heavy. And another factor is size. I think it's like 35 feet long, so it's quite large. That's an advantage and disadvantage. If you want a ton of room, then by all means convert the schoolie. You got a lot of vehicle there to convert into living space, but also at the same time, the length might be a prohibiting factor, because I don't know if campgrounds have length limits or not, and it's just more difficult to drive. It's a bus. And along with those two things, with the weight and the size, it affects fuel mileage. I believe with that engine in the bus right now, fuel mileage might be 7 or 8 miles a gallon, so it's not fantastic. With the lighter RV, which I believe, in my guesstimate, is about 12,500 pounds empty. So this is going to affect the fuel mileage. From the 2 videos that I saw on YouTube, these guys are claiming 15 miles to the gallon. We'll see. I don't know. Another factor is the schoolie. Pertaining to the schoolie, is it's been done before. Seen it quite a bit. Doesn't appeal to me. It might have a lot of hippie appeal, but I'm not a hippie by any means. And one of the other factors is for converting the RV to a diesel is the cool factor. How often do you see a Cummins swapped crappy looking RV? I think it's just cool. So moving on to the details, we'll start with the mass of these vehicles. or specifically the RV and the engines. With the added weight of a diesel, I do have concerns about the front springs carrying the weight. Right now, these are numbers off the internet, but the mass of the 454 and the TH400 is maybe in the 950 pound area. I've seen estimates of 700 pounds for a Chevy 454 without the exhaust manifolds for whatever reason. And the exhaust manifolds add another 80 to 100 pounds, so I opted to go 80 pounds. And the TH500 weighs a measly 150 pounds. It comes up to like 900, 950 pounds. Now the mass of the Cummins diesel, heavier, and I've seen estimates. I seen a guy on YouTube, and he put the Cummins on a scale, and he measured it at 800 pounds, and he had the turbocharger, all the manifolds on there, like a fully dressed engine, and he said 800 pounds. Other websites say it's 1,200 pounds. So I just opted for the 1,200 pounds, figure heavy. And the transmission that I chose, the Allison 2350 HS, weighs a whopping 330 pounds. So all that added up I'm gonna guesstimate 1430, 1450. I don't know. It's in that area. So the difference of 500 pounds. Is it an issue? I don't know. And if I do run into that situation, what am I going to do? Might need beefier springs. I believe there's websites that you can find a higher spring to fit in this chassis. At the very best, it might not need anything. It might be able to handle it. I don't know. Right now, the RV is equipped with those polyurethane airbags that go inside the spring, but they don't hold air. I will repair those, and maybe those are just enough to handle the extra weight. And the ultimate solution would be to bag the whole thing, air springs all the way around, front, back, which is absolutely crazy, but we'll see. Moving on to the engine. So originally the plan was to be 100% mechanical. So we know that the 12 valve Cummins is a fully mechanical engine. There are no controllers, no electronics. It's just mechanical. It just runs. And also the AT545 that I initially was going to use is a mechanical transmission. So essentially it would be nuke proof. It would be a bug out rig. A bomb could go off and that vehicle is still going to run, which is crazy. But that was how it initially started. It's kind of deviated a little bit for a really good reason though. Moving on to the engine, why a Cummins? Well, it started out as the all mechanical theme, but besides that, it's a bulletproof engine, easy horsepower gains. It's a relatively simple engine, and it's just plain awesome. You can't beat the awesomeness of a 12 valve. And in my case, for the donor, buses are pretty reasonably priced, and you can pick up a used bus, an older bus with a 12 valve, and you get the bonus of all the other systems and stuff you would have needed anyways, regarding like the the radiator, intercooler, all the hoses. You can use the wiring harnesses. There's just so much stuff on the bus that you can take off and use on the RV, I plan on using stuff off of there. The air system, I'm going to have onboard air. That came with the bus, it has air brakes, so I'm going to be using that. Just a quick comparison of the engine horsepowers and torque, just to give you an idea. Right now, the 454 running in primo condition, the max horsepower is 240 horsepower at 3,800 RPM, and it has a max torque of 375 foot-pounds at 3,200 RPM. Now for the 12 valve, max horsepower is 190 horsepower at 2,500 RPM, so it's less horsepower at a lower RPM, and then the torque is at 475 foot-pounds at 1,600 RPM. That is a full 100 foot-pounds of torque in the basement at 1,600 RPM. You got max torque shortly off idle, which is crazy. And that can be improved on quite simply. So, staying in that theme, what am I going to do to the engine before I transplant it back into the RV? Well, an item that comes up a lot is almost essential. If you're going to be taking a Cummins out of anything and the killer dowel pin hasn't been fixed, fix that right away. It's a common issue. Everyone knows about it. There's a dowel pin that lives inside the where the injector pump is. It's all gear driven, and that dowel pin will work its way out. If you get lucky, it'll sneak past the gears and end up in your oil pan. Worst case scenario, it runs to the gear set and destroys the engine. The engine will be junk if that pin goes through the gear set. Fix the killer dowel pin. So now about power gains. There are so many methods to go about power gains on these mechanical engines. The one that seems to appeal to me the most is the fuel plate. And I can go through that once I start fiddling with it, but most people who deal with the 12 valves understand these things. The fueling plate controls the fuel that goes to the engine, and that dictates horsepower. They're easily modifiable. You can buy new fueling plates, or you can just take the one you got and modify it with a grinder, and in a half an hour, with just common household tools and a grinder, you can add 100 horsepower, 150 foot-pounds of torque in a half an hour. I mean, I don't want to be jacking the horsepower up a whole lot. I mean, not a whole lot. Well, anyways, moving on. Another one I may mess around with are the governor springs. Those springs dictate the maximum RPM of the engine, and I think right now that the RPM max is 2,800 RPM, and the stock fueling plate actually starts rolling back the fueling way before that 2,800 RPM. There are kits for raising it just a touch, maybe to 3,000 or 3,100 RPM. I might. A lot of people don't, but we'll see. And the last thing I might improve on, and this could be added later, but it is an exhaust brake. The PAC manufactures them. There's several. Jake is another manufacturer, but they all work on the same principle. It's just choking down the exhaust and creates back pressure, I believe, to increase your engine braking. So I'm seriously considering that. So another thing regarding the engine mounts, or the engine, is the engine mounting. The way it's mounted in a bus right now is not like you would find a Cummins mounted in a pickup truck. The pickup truck mounted Cummins is the standard mounting, where there's two engine mounts on the side of the block, and then there'll be a cross member behind the transmission, and it's pretty conventional. In the bus, it is not that way. There's an engine mount below the well, it's where the harmonic balancer would be. It's probably not a harmonic balancer, but we're on the crank. Right underneath, there's a single mount there, and then there is two mounts on the side of the transmission housing, one of the housings, and I'll go through that in the next video and explaining that and show pictures of that. But it creates that 3-point mounting method. And then, surprisingly not, the transmissions are just cantilevered off the engine. There is no mount. There is no cross member for the transmission. They're just hanging out in space. I don't know. Works on a bus? Probably work on an RV, I would think. So, regarding engine mounting, and if it's kind of confusing how that works with the mounting for this industrial Cummins, let's take a look at a picture or two of some industrial mounted Cummins. All right, let's take a look at the mounting for the Cummins 5.9 engine that would be typical in a school bus. So as you can see here, pictured is, and these are off the internet, but this is identical to what's in my bus right now. And as you can see, right here there is an engine mount, and this is that SAE adapter I was talking about, or I will be talking about. I don't know what size this is, but this is pretty common. Got the engine, SAE adapter. And there are mounting tabs on either side of those, and that's common for both bell housing adapters. And then on the front, this is the engine mount for the front, so it's right underneath that, well, that pulley right there, or that harmonic balancer. It's not a harmonic balancer. I highly doubt it. But that is very typical on how these industrial engines are mounted. So obviously I come up with mounts and how I'm going to mount this into the chassis. So, and another thing that is pictured here is the air compressor. That is the air compressor, and this is the power steering pump. So you can see how all that stuff is gear driven off the front of the engine. Let me find it here. Through this gear train. And that's all gear driven. The only belt operated system on here is the alternator. And that killer dowel pin lives right in here. So you can see that if that pin were to fall out, it can either go through the gear train and destroy your engine, or sneak past, dent your cover, and end up in the oil pan. But that should cover that. So I got a challenge. All right, so now that we got that out of the way regarding engine mounting, let's go to the rear differential. So the rear differential that's in the RV right now is a Dana 70 HD. I identified it, and it's positively a 70 HD. I initially had to, if I was going to go with that other transmission, I was gonna have to re-gear. That's not an issue now, and that'll be covered in the next video, and you'll understand why I won't be messing with that. But if I did have to change the gearing, it was gonna be a little bit of a challenge. There's not a whole lot of I should take that back. There are plenty of gear sets that you can buy, but I'm looking for a specific ratio, which would be a really high gearing. And the highest gear set that I can find is 3.54 ratio. And in the next video, you will see why it's not ideal. A 308 would be ideal, but those gear sets aren't available. People have modified gear sets, the 308 gear set, and I don't know if it's from a Dana 80 or it's from a Dana 60, but there were modifications required with the carrier. I don't think with the housing, but in order to get those gears to go in there, you had to modify the carrier with machining. It had to do with where the carrier resides in relationship to the pinion. All very critical, and I don't want to mess with it, but luckily I don't have to. And in the next video, you'll understand why I don't have to re-gear, and it really worked out for the best. So that's it for this video. I want to keep these short. So in the next video, it's going to be specifically transmission related only, and I'm going to run through the decision making for which transmission I wanted to use and why I ruled out using the original transmission out of that bus, because it just wasn't ideal and it shot, so I really had no choice. So thanks for watching, and see you next time.